to Jewish World Weekly on I-24 News. I'm Emily Francis. Every week we focus on stories, issues, and personalities of Jewish interest here in Israel and in the diaspora, the global Jewish community. And we start with our top 5 items in the Jewish world, presented by Sarah Rogers. Hi, Sarah.
Thanks, Emily. Here are the top 5 items in the Jewish world this week. Argentinian President Javier Milei has announced the declassification of documents pertaining to how war criminals were able to flee to South America. The files are set to shed some light on the so-called rat lines, which allowed Nazis such as Joseph Mengele and Adolf Eichmann to leave Germany via Central Europe and Central America towards the end of World War II. Most of these war criminals evaded justice for years, apart from Eichmann, who was abducted by Mossad and taken to Israel, where he was tried and executed. Construction has begun on the site of a historic Jewish cemetery in Poland, despite heavy protests and a lengthy legal battle. The Polish court ruled that the site in Nowa Słupia in southern Poland was not protected as a heritage site as it could not be fully verified, with workers claiming to dig 31 inches deep and not finding anything. This is contrary to records and satellite imagery from the 1940s, proving that it was in fact the site of the cemetery. Almost a quarter of Americans who were raised Jewish no longer identify with their religion, according to a survey done by Pew Research. According to the poll, 17% describe themselves as religiously unaffiliated, 2% now see themselves as Christian, 1% as Muslim, and 4% identify with a different religion. In total, 76% of Americans raised Jewish still identify with Judaism, similar to 77% of Muslim Americans and 73% of Christian Americans. Disney reportedly had to hire more security for Gal Gadot after she received death threats following a conflict with her Snow White co-star Rachel Zegler. After the trailer for Snow White dropped, Zegler, who plays the main character, tweeted "Free Palestine," an indirect attack at her Israeli co-star. According to Variety, Snow White producer Mark Platt, who is Jewish, flew across the country to ask Zegler to delete her post, which she refused. And finally, 5 men in Indianapolis have been arrested after filming a music video in a 100-year-old synagogue. The incident took place at the conservative and restructionist Bet El Tzedek synagogue, with the 5 men entering the building to film what they described as a rap music video. Police were called to the scene after eyewitnesses saw them breaking and entering, with 4 apprehended at the location and 1 arrested after a police chase. Those are your top 5 items in the Jewish world this week. Back to you, Emily.
As the U.S. is intensifying its crackdown on anti-Israel students on college campuses, the families of October 7th victims are also joining the fight by filing a lawsuit against organizations and their leaders, alleging that they knew about the October 7th attack as it unfolded. Here's more from I-24's Lynn Plagmeijer.
Families of October 7 victims have filed a lawsuit against anti-Israel activist groups and their leaders, alleging that based on their public relations activity, they had prior knowledge of the October 7 Hamas onslaught on Israel. Some groups reportedly reactivated their social media accounts just before the attack. Others are said to have issued protest and propaganda materials when the attack unfolded in southern Israel. The families are seeking compensation and punitive damages. One of the leaders who allegedly had prior knowledge to the October 7 attacks is Mahmoud Khalil. He's affiliated with the anti-Israel group Columbia University Apartheid Divest and is a well-known organizer of many pro-Palestine protests at Columbia University. He was detained on March 8 by the federal immigration authorities in a significant escalation by the Trump administration to detain and deport student activists.
This is not a matter of simply violating university rules. This is a movement, an anti-war movement. We have sparked similar Gaza solidarity encampments across the nation and even across the globe.
This is not about free speech. This is about people that don't have a right to be in the United States to begin with. No one has a right to a student visa. No one has a right to a green card, by the way. So when you apply for a student visa, or any visa to enter the United States, we have a right to deny you for virtually any reason. But I think being a supporter of Hamas and coming into our universities and turning them upside down and being complicit in what are clearly crimes of vandalization, complicit in shutting down learning institutions. There are kids at these schools that can't go to class.
And so, as the IDF once again expands its military operation in Gaza, the crackdown on anti-Israel activists also intensifies.
Ben Gurion University in the Negev is paving the way forward in the wake of the October 7th campaign to significantly enhance many aspects of the over 50-year institution and the Negev as a whole, fulfilling the dream of Israel's first Prime Minister, David Ben Gurion. Now joining us in studio is Jeff Kaye, the Vice President for Public Affairs and Resource Development at Ben Gurion University. Hello, and thank you for being here.
Really, thanks for inviting me.
You're a busy man indeed.
Oh,
so as we've seen, throughout history, when there have been crises or wars, we're seeing a generation of people from the diaspora feeling like they want to participate. What's unique about how this is really grown exponentially since October 7th, like never seen before?
So first of all, you're absolutely correct. I would say for at least 200 years, probably more, since travel from country to country began, the Israel diaspora relations, or the Eretz Israel Jewish community relations, have been defined in a whole lot of different ways. And one of them is giving philanthropy. We used to call it tzedakah. So this is nothing new. And if you look at the peaks of the history of the last 100 years, you will see that when there was a crisis in the Jewish world, and particularly in Israel, you see a dramatic increase in philanthropic gifts to Israel, to institutions in Israel. I think for a lot, first of all, there's a real need. People would identify a need and therefore want to give. But I think for people sitting outside of Israel, it's a way of them expressing their love and giving them something to do. Mm-hmm. And so again, you could see it just after the Six Day Civil War. You could see it after the Yom Kippur War, and a whole lot of times in our history line. And October 7th, of course, was a very dramatic moment in that time as well. I would say to you that, so Ben Gurion University, as you mentioned before, we were hit disproportionately. We had, in the first days, we had scores of students and faculty killed, thousands of people displaced, faculty, students, etc., kidnapped, hostages, and all of a sudden we had thousands of our students who were being drafted to go on Tzav Shmon emergency call-up. And we had a staff and leadership meeting on the 8th of October and said, okay, these are the things, this is the situation, and we need to provide needs for what's going on here. And actually decided not to launch an emergency campaign on that day, because we said we have to take care of business now. We have to give grants now. We have to buy new laptop computers for students. We have to find housing for our displaced people. All of these needs, and it needs to be done now within hours. And if we now say we're going to go out and do this, but we're going to wait until the money is raised, then that's not doing the job, the speed we need to do. So we spent the money first and said, we said to our leadership, we'll come back in a few days, and if once our reserve is finished, depleted, we'll come back and see we need more money. And I think we got a lot of respect out of that by being not opportunistic. There was a huge demand. We met the demand and then said, okay, now we're a few days into this, let's see what we need. And we then launched a campaign for these very, very specific needs for both our community who had been affected immediately, and then the things that were about to happen in the weeks and months that followed, and raised a sum of like $12 million that helped us address the needs. And I think our donors respected us for being responsive and not opportunistic.
Right, of course. And I think, when you look at also the course of history and the other wars and what the needs were of the citizens at that given time, I mean, this time is so much more complicated. We're having soldiers and people talking about PTSD, things that weren't talked about in the wake of the other wars. People used to giving, you have, Israel, the bonds and the IDF and whatnot, but there are real needs of the people here on the ground. So I feel like, tell me if you agree, that people in the diaspora feeling so connected to where we're going through, there is a move also in a way that's actually going to help.
No, absolutely. Here. But you have to differentiate between, you have to understand that there's sensitivity and people want to do the right thing. And if you're there with the right need at the right time, they will respond. And if you're there, let's just say cynically, then people will give, but they'll remember afterwards. One of the anecdotes I remember is that after the Carmel Forest fire, there was a branch of the Scouts in Eilat that was raising money to help the victims of the fire. Now, maybe that's an extreme example, and I've got nothing against the Scouts, but you cannot be in a situation. You have to be able to identify a real need and what the impact is going to be of an emergency situation. And the other thing that people have to understand, or organizations have to understand, is if you can't spend that money at the speed at which you're raising it, then it wasn't an emergency.
Right.
And I remember, as a lot of people will remember, after 9/11, the Red Cross raised millions of hundreds of millions of dollars, and about a year later a lot of that money was still there, and when asked they said, well, we're keeping it for future disasters. We cannot be in that situation, and no Israeli institution, university otherwise should be in that situation. If you say it's an emergency, it means you're going to need, you're able to spend the money now. That creates the trust that people are going to be with you when it's not an emergency as well.
Lastly, really quickly, because we're out of time, talk about, I know there are very big plans, I'm sure we'll hear more about it, but we know this is Ben Gurion's vision. So is there going to be expansion of more programs, like as far as research, R&D, science?
I'll say two things. We were founded by a mandate by David Ben Gurion long before it was called David Ben Gurion University. Already in the 50s, he said there's got to be a university. In order to be able to develop the Negev, you need scientists there to learn how to use the sun for energy and grow things, and all of the things that people know about. There is a real danger at the moment that with instability in the Negev, there's a danger of depopulation, of the stronger population saying we're not going to stay there, we're going to move away. So Ben Gurion University is doubling down on the mission that it had already, which is to reach out to the population in the Negev, whether it's the cities or the kibbutzim, and say, we're here for you, we can help in any way that you are able to identify as important to you. But our long-term plan is we received a plot of land called our North Campus. We're building a northern campus of our university in Beersheba, which will double the footprint of the university, and that will take care of an increasing number of students coming, but also the ITF intelligence and communication users who are moving down, and the idea is to give them a university degree at the same time as they're serving the country.
Wow. Jeff Kaye, thank you very much, and hopefully we'll see you again as more great plans develop.
Thank you very much.
Various countries in Europe and elsewhere have emerged since October 7th to champion Palestinian statehood, despite the dominant jihadist elements. And one such place is Norway, where the government has stood out for its clear side in this war. I-24 News correspondent Adi Cohen from our sister Hebrew channel went there and filed this report.
18 months of prolonged and bloody war in the Middle East have managed, it seems, to make its way all the way to the remote regions of Scandinavia. Ripples, some would say, which verge on a tsunami.
To resist the injustices done by our government in our name.
Since the October 7 massacre, and despite its echoing horrors, Norway has become one of the countries in Europe most hostile to Israel.
Norway was among the very first Western countries to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. We have condemned the violations of international humanitarian law.
Anerkjennelse av Palestina en støtte til moderate krefter som på vikende front I en langvarig og grusom konflikt.
In the past year and a half, this hostility has been expressed through Norway's harsh condemnations of Israel, with Oslo even going so far as to file a lawsuit against Israel in The Hague. Then there is also Norway's campaign to defend and support UNRWA, as well as its recognition of a Palestinian state, and not forgetting the Norwegian government's ban on the kingdom, sending its condolences for the massacre, or recognizing Hamas as a declared terrorist organization. A hostile sentiment which is also expressed out on the streets, almost in every corner.
But the government bears the largest responsibility. But the government sees that anti-Israel moves and rhetoric is popular also with the large chunk of the population. Only a few days after the massacre, there was a change of Minister of Foreign Affairs in Norway. He, Espen Barth Eide, he has single-handedly, together with the Prime Minister, changed the Norwegian policy towards Israel.
We need to establish a Palestinian government, a Palestinian state, and the Palestinian state has to be recognized.
The party decided to adopt a full economic boycott of Israel, and they are now working to make it the policy of the party itself.
Almost every week, the streets of the capital, Oslo, are flooded with mass demonstrations. But even away from them, the locals advise me when I visit to avoid Israeli symbols or even not to speak Hebrew.
You could have some unpleasant experiences, unfortunately, especially from young Muslim men, but also from ethnic Norwegian leftists.
I think in Norway we have quite a strange situation, coincidence, where especially the left side of a political is very Palestinian-friendly. Palestinian cause is almost a part of the left-wing politics in Norway. I became aware of it after October 7 that people are basically blind. It doesn't matter what Israel does, what Israel says, they will always be against Israel.
And as in too many destinations where the anti-Israel climate triumphs over public consciousness without any real counter-reactions, anti-Semitism raises its head.
We've got people that's been beaten up. We had people who had to go in hiding in a way as well. People had things written on the door. Luckily, I live just out of Oslo.
For being Jews or being Israeli supporters?
Both. Last year, he was a Christian Norwegian guy, got beaten up actually.
Why?
Because he had an Israeli flag. I grew up in a beautiful country. Norway is actually quite beautiful. I never had problems being a Jew in Norway. Never felt any anti-Semitism at all when I grew up. My upbringing was different from what my kids has felt. Knew the last 20 years it started to become tougher to live in Norway.
For some, it probably has root in anti-Semitism, but I'm not eager to put that label on it. 33% of the Norwegian public says that their conception about Israel affects what they think about Jews in general.
Our few supporters in Norway attribute the hostile discourse against Israel mainly to the rampant disinformation fueled by the local media, schools, and well-funded pro-Palestinian organizations.
There was a survey done last year where 50% of the Norwegians said Israel treats the Palestinians as badly as Jews were treated during the Second World War.
Wow.
50%. There are very widespread misconceptions in the Norwegian public about Israel's situation. More than 20% says that as long as the state of Israel exists, there cannot be peace in the world. It's a result of not only bias in the media, but also in the textbooks in school, where they learn the story only almost according to the Palestinian narrative, and you don't get the Israeli story.
For the past 2 decades, Conrad has been running MIF, a non-religious pro-Israel organization, which has supported a distant Jewish state since the 70s. In the past year and a half, the reality has become particularly charged and tense.
We have had several instances when meetings and events have been disturbed by anti-Israel activists. That feels threatening. We have had to pay tens of thousands of euros in having security companies help us during events and meetings. The Norwegian government has not spoken out against this mob that is threatening and intimidating. There has been a few violent incidents against friends of Israel, and I'm also concerned that this has not been condemned strongly.
I get a lot of hate from it almost every day, and sometimes at work, but I always say my opinion. Even when I'm at work, I say that I support Israel. I get told that I support child murders and that I'm a Nazi, which makes no sense.
We met MIF members at a weekend of consolidation and enrichment for the organization's young people in one of the forests of Norway, far from the radar of the protesters.
So my father is a Jew, so I always knew about Israel, but I never thought that much about the political side of it before October 7th. And then when I saw a brutal massacre of people in Israel and everything what followed, I became very interested in the political side of things, and I think that Israel have a better argument. I also have a strong opinion about media reaction in Norway to the conflict.
History in Europe and in the Muslim world cries to us that there is a need for the Jewish people to be sovereign in their own land.
Thus, the work of those organizations like MIF enters a place where the state has failed for years in the propaganda war, while clearly underestimating the real threat inherent in the growing wave of hatred against Israel, which, as a consequence of this, is directed at Israelis and Jews around the world.
When it comes to, in terms of the Norwegian public, unfortunately, the Norwegian public has been accidentally brainwashed by seeing just pictures and photos. As of course, they're devastating, but they see only one side of the conflict.
Very ashamed that we have paid for Hamas support. I want to say that you have people here that actually know the truth and see your suffering, and we will never stop.
We are here, and we're going to be here. But I think we're going to win the struggle in the end. But it's going to be a tough fight. But we will win the struggle both in Israel and here as well.
Last week's International Conference on Combating Anti-Semitism in Jerusalem experienced quite a bit of pushback over the inclusion of many far-right European politicians, leading many to choose to cancel their attendance. Politicians, world leaders, advocates, influencers, and entertainers converged to talk about the anti-Semitic issues facing Jews, not just in Israel, but around the world. And joining us now with one of those people that made everybody laugh last week is Ami Kozak, comedian, impressionist, musician, Jewish advocate, influencer, and I'm sure so many other things. A real-life renaissance man.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good to meet you. You're very popular and you're very funny. Tell us about this conference and, you know, from your perspective, what was the experience like?
So for me, my role there was to bring levity and laughter. Obviously, the subject matter of combating anti-Semitism in its current form today is very heavy, and there were a lot of panels and speeches addressing serious issues, and I found my function there was to unify everybody and kind of transcend the politics and just be able to laugh. So it was broken up throughout the day into various panels and important discussions to be had, and then at the end of the day, at the nighttime program, we had some fun, and artists were singing songs, and I came out and was able to.
But that's a lot of pressure. I mean, to come out of serious depression, and then, like, I mean, we know humor is the only way that the Jewish people have gotten through many tragedies. But
I got
with
lucky.
Those kind of people in the room.
Yeah, I got lucky because at one point I was approached and said, "Okay, so Bibi want to speak for 2 hours, so the room gonna empty out after that. I don't know when you want to go because he gonna come and then it's over. So what do you want to do?" And I'm like. So there was an Israeli element to it of things kind of moving and ebb and flow. But luckily, I got into a time slot where I think people were ready to laugh.
Yeah.
And I was able to come out and bring out, do some of their favorite Israeli politicians and American politicians.
So, like, let's hear it.
Oh, you know, your favorite president, he wasn't there, but he wished he could be there in spirit. So I brought the next best thing, your favorite president, Donald J. Trump. So good for Israel, ambassadors of truth. And the Ministry of Diaspora was there. I even said, you know, diaspora is a word I hadn't heard before, Emily. It's actually Melania's sister's name, Diaspora. She's a great, beautiful person, Diaspora. We love that. And we had a great time, and I brought out a little bit of Bibi, did a little Bibi for the folks, a little bit of President Herzog, so that was a lot of fun.
People have a sense of humor about the Bibi impressions?
Well, after he went, it sort of warmed them up. They started with Bibi and they ended with Bibi. It was like bookends. It was a beautiful thing. And all the words that Bibi uses are beautiful words, you know. They say Trump has the best words, but actually Bibi, you know, we will defend Israel tirelessly, vigorously, relentlessly, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
And that's kind of the opposite energy of Herzog, which I met the night before at his event, and it was more like, you know, he has kind of one emotion, so he's very steady. So when he gets up, it's just like, I am totally outraged by anti-Semitism, really. truly, can't you tell? I'm outraged, really, truly, really. And I kind of feel like he just took an Ambien, you know, he's very, very calm, very, very calm. Really, truly, I just stubbed my toe. It's okay. Iran and his proxies will try to destroy us, but first I will take a nap, and then we'll deal with it. So it was fun. We had a good time.
It's amazing how you could go back and forth between people in one sentence almost.
Yeah.
How do you split your brain like that?
You know, it's like my little X-Men superpower. Ever since I was a kid, and my parents were saying, Ami, go on the table and do so-and-so. You know, I grew up with sort of that borscht belt.
So you had that pressure of, like, parents making you, as a kid, entertain the friends?
Yeah, I'm a youngest child, so it's just sort of, and I'm short, so that's how you stand out. You got to be hilarious, and if you're the youngest in the family, and at a very young age, my parents were professionals, but they loved that I could imitate all their friends and stuff, so I was standing on the coffee table just imitating my dad's friends in, like, the Catskills in the summer, so we came from that, like, spirit of admiring comedy.
Yeah, well, and it also sounds like you enjoyed it. It wasn't like your parents were like, look at my son and perform and make people laugh.
You know, all of a sudden being able to turn into other people creates this huge reaction, and I've used that power ever since to my benefit. So.
And has anyone used it on you, impersonating you?
My children try to do it, where they're like, you know, they imitate my tired dad bod walking around the house. So I have it coming, you know, when you have little kids at home. I have it coming. They find me funny for now, but it's going to run out at a certain point.
Well, at least they find you funny for now. My kids don't care that I'm on TV. I'm like, don't you think it's cool your mom's on TV?
It's fun when your kids start to imitate you and you feel like, oh my God, I'm really raging too much. And it's like, that's what they do.
Ami, thank you so much. And it's good to see you, and come back next time you're here.
Looking forward. Always love being here. Thank you.
So that's all for this week's episode of Jewish World Weekly. Thank you so much for watching. You can head over to the I-24 News YouTube channel to catch up on this episode as well as previous episodes. I'm Emily Francis. Thank you so much, as always, for watching Jewish World Weekly. And shalom from Tel Aviv. Bye.